This ancient book reveals a shocking secret from the mid-12th century. A pair of 800-year-old texts, William of Newburgh's Historia Rerum Anglicarum and Ralph O'Coggeshall's Chronicum Anglicanum. These tell the bizarre mystery of what many deem as the Green Children. You won't want to miss this episode. What would you do if you were presented with overwhelming evidence that another race of beings existed alongside our very own? How would you react if these beings stepped into our world? This is precisely what the residents of a tiny Suffolk town were confronted with in the mid-12th century. The story of the Green Children of Woolpit, as it has come to be known, has fascinated and disturbed historians and folklorists alike since its rediscovery in the 19th century. Two strange children, a young brother and a sister, were found near the town. Now, in one version of the story, they were discovered wandering an open field, while in another version, they appear in a ditch or pit for trapping wolves, perhaps the very pit from where the village of Woolpit or Wolf Pit gets its name. Now, since their appearance coincided with the harvest, they were first seen by workers in the field. These laborers knew right away that something was wrong. According to their descriptions, the children were wearing garments of strange color and unknown materials. Neither of them could speak English. Easily the most bizarre detail is that both of them had green skin. After being taken into captivity, the children were held in the mansion of a nobleman, Sir Richard de Calne, just 6 miles north of where they were originally discovered. A parade of locals came to visit where they would gawk and gape at the peculiar pair. The Green Children were then given plenty of food, but refused to touch any of it. Instead, as time went on and on, they began to starve. Now, this is primarily because of one main reason. The villagers kept trying to feed these kids Sbarro pizza. At last, desperate to see the children restored to good health, one of their captors offered them beans cut off or torn from stalks, meaning that they were brought to them fresh and raw. Now, as it turned out, this was the only thing that the children recognized as food. Now, according to Ralph of Coggeshall, the brother and sister broke open the bean stalks, not the pod or shell of the beans, evidently supposing that the beans were contained in the hollows of the stalks. But not finding beans within the stalks, they again began to weep, which when the bystanders noticed, they opened the shells and showed them the beans themselves, whereupon, with great joyfulness, they ate beans for a long time, entirely, and would touch no other food. Over the coming months, both children would slowly adapt to other forms of food, and with this new diet came a remarkable change. The color of their skin slowly shifted from green to a Caucasian complexion. Over time, the community began to integrate the Green Children into society. Both of them were baptized, and tragically, the brother, who was the younger of the two and always in poor health, began to waste away, and he eventually died. His sister, however, thrived. In fact, the once green girl also learned to speak English. When she was eventually fluent enough, the people of Woolpit began pressing her for details. Who was she? Where did she come from? How did they wind up in Woolpit? The girl had a wild story to share. She asserted that the inhabitants and all that they had in that country were of a green color, and they saw no sun, but enjoyed a degree of light like what is after sunset. Does she mean the moon? Being asked how she came into this country with the aforesaid boy, she replied that as they were following their flocks, they came to a certain cavern until they came to its mouth. When they came out of it, they were struck senseless by the excessive light of the sun and the unusual temperature of the air, and they thus lay for a long time, being terrified by the noise of those who came on them. They wished to fly, but they could not find the entrance of the cavern before they were caught. This account comes from Ralph of Coggeshall's version. When it was retold by William of Newburgh, he claimed that the Green Children had been lured into our world by the sound of church bells. He also added more curious details. The girl called her old home St. Martin's Land. From there, they could see a fantastic land shining across a broad river, perhaps the human world. world. Now, the residents of St. Martin's Land were Christian, as they were here. The surviving green children wound up working for Sir Richard de Calne and his family, and before long, the girl became so comfortable with human life that she earned a reputation for her promiscuity, her conduct described as rather loose and wanton. Now, if Star Trek has taught us anything, it's that we need to watch out for those seductive green ladies. The green girl eventually settled down, however, marrying and living for years in a small Suffolk town 40 miles from Woolpit. It's a rather vague ending to the story, but some researchers actually believe that they have found evidence for the girl in the historical record, because author Duncan Lunan maintains that the green girl took the name Agnes and married Richard Barr, a royal official. And since then, the story of the green children of Woolpit has been retold over and over and over again, capturing the imaginations of dozens of subsequent generations. William of Newburgh expressed how puzzled he was by this tale. At first, he didn't believe it, but had to admit that, having collected it firsthand, he lent it a bit of credibility. He wrote this: "Although the thing is asserted by many, yet I have long been in doubt about the matter, deeming it ridiculous to credit a thing supported by no rational foundation, or at least one of a mysterious character. Yet, in the end, I was so overwhelmed by the weight of so many competent witnesses that I have been compelled to believe and wonder over a matter I was unable to comprehend and unravel by the powers of my intellect." Over 800 years later, we are still asking the same question. What were the green children of Woolpit? At the time, they would have certainly been understood in the context of Suffolk fairy folklore. After all, they wore green, a color closely associated with the little people. Their descriptions of St. Martin's Land as dimly lit, along with their inability or refusal to eat human food, also finds a close correlation in fairy folklore. These same attributes might also mean that the green children of Woolpit actually came from the land of the dead. There's a close association between fairies and the dead across European folklore. Even the preferred food of the green children, beans, has a direct link to the dead. The relationship between beans and the dead actually originates in ancient Greece. No one is certain how the connection arose, but there is some suggestion that the high content of amino acid called L-dopa or levodopa in beans might have served as inspiration. Now, levodopa is a precursor to dopamine. In excessive amounts, levodopa can cause nightmares, insomnia, or even hallucinations while awake. There is even some evidence that ancient cultures might have used beans to contact the dead through prophetic dreams and altered states of consciousness. But more recently, people have speculated that the green children of Woolpit might have been entirely physical, perhaps inhabitants of the Hollow Earth, or more popularly, another planet. Now, Duncan Lunan, who believes that he tracked down the sister as Agnes Bear, argued in a 1996 Analog magazine article that the green children were actually extraterrestrials. And according to Duncan, the strange realm from which they came was not a magical fairyland, but rather a planet held in synchronous orbit around its sun. Now, in these situations, the planet's orbit and rotation align so that one side is constantly kept in sunlight and the other, well, it's held in perpetual darkness. Researchers theorize that if life exists on planets like this, it would be confined to a narrow band between the sun-scorched side and the frozen dark side, which admittedly sounds quite similar to the perpetual sunset of St. Martin's Land. Duncan even goes on to speculate that the green children were actual victims of what he referred to as a matter transmitter malfunction that had accidentally transported them from their home planet to Earth. Their coloration, he speculated, was a side effect of the genetically modified plants that made up their extraterrestrial diet on their homeworld. Now, interestingly, Duncan's idea that the green children were aliens is actually quite old itself. Although the story of the green children of Woolpit wasn't given a whole lot of attention until roughly the mid-1800s. Another writer, a Robert Burton, had addressed the tale in his 1621 work, The Anatomy of Melancholy. In it, Burton put forth the idea that the green children might have fallen from heaven, which sounds quite similar to extraterrestrial visitation. Now, finally, there are also rational explanations, if that's even possible. Some think that the green children were the offspring of Flemish immigrants. This would explain why those in Suffolk found their language unintelligible. As for their green skin, some believe that it is a dietary deficiency known as hypochromic, or green sickness. In this condition, sufferers not only sometimes take on a greenish hue, but also notably refuse to eat. This deficiency might be the reason behind the brothers' death. Now, this is similar to another possibility put forward by Paul Harris, who originally thought that the green children of Woolpit were undernourished youth, speaking a different dialect, who wandered into flint mines in Thetford. The mines are near the village of Fordham, St. Martin, which might explain the name of their homeland. Harris suggested that, perhaps from the twilight of the thick woodlands, the children could see a less forested and therefore sunnier land across the river. It's fun to look at all the possibilities behind the green children of Woolpit, and at the same time, it is important to remember that after 8 centuries, we still haven't definitively solved this mystery, and it's likely to remain that way forever. But more importantly, I want to know what you guys think. Do you guys know any friendly green children? Because if so, I would love to hear from you down below, so please leave a comment if you do, or I guess even if you don't. And if you guys enjoyed today's episode, be sure to go ahead and smack that like and subscribe button for more content just like today's. And more importantly, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you guys in the very next episode.